You know, it's funny. I feel like I keep seeing Zen and mindfulness everywhere.
No, yeah.
Yeah, like corporate retreats, meditation apps, even like on the label of that matcha latte I had this morning.
Huh. Yeah, they're definitely trendy.
But are they actually the same thing? Or are they just, trendy buzzwords? So that's what we're going to unpack today.
It's a common question for sure, especially with how often people use them interchangeably.
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting, right? We're looking at this article. It's called Hold On. Vos Spark.
Okay.
Don't worry, you don't have to brush up on your Japanese or anything.
Ooh.
The article's in English, and it takes a look at how Zen and mindfulness compare, especially in Japan.
It's really interesting to see how those practices are viewed in different cultures, yeah.
Totally. So let's start with Zen. For someone who's never even seen a monastery, what's the main idea?
So Zen actually originated from Indian Buddhism,
Okay.
and it evolved into Zen Buddhism in China. At its core, it's all about sitting with no purpose.
Sitting with no purpose. See, now that sounds a little strange to me, especially in, our world where it's go, 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 achieve, achieve, achieve.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive.
Right.
Like, how can doing nothing lead to anything?
Exactly.
Well, that's the thing about Zen. It's not about being passive, but it is about letting go. Letting go of that constant striving, the attachment to outcomes. It's about being present.
So it's more about being than doing.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. The perfect example is a Zen garden. It's simple,
Mhm.
but it's not about, achieving some goal.
Right.
It's about mindful observation, appreciating things as they are.
That makes sense.
And speaking of Zen, we can't forget Bodhidharma. He brought Zen from India to China.
So he's like the OG Zen master.
You could say that, yeah.
Yeah.
He was hugely important in shaping Zen Buddhism.
That's so cool. And this is a total tangent, but didn't Steve Jobs, love Zen?
He did. He was really into Zen philosophy. Some people even think that his practice influenced Apple's design, the whole minimalist aesthetic.
Oh, wow. So Zen might have shaped the technology we use every day. That's wild. Okay, but what about mindfulness? It seems to come up with Zen a lot, but it feels different.
You're right. Unlike Zen, which is very connected to religion, mindfulness is usually practiced in a secular way. It comes from the Pali word sati, meaning awareness.
Awareness, okay.
It's about paying attention to right now without judgment.
So less about reaching enlightenment and more about not freaking out when your inbox is exploding.
Yeah, exactly. John Kabat-Zinn, who was really key in bringing mindfulness to the West, he talked a lot about those practical applications, like focusing on your breath, how that can actually stop stress.
Interesting.
It's about recognizing your emotions without being controlled by them.
Okay, so it's like hitting pause, giving yourself a second to choose how to react.
Exactly. And while Zen and mindfulness have different origins and approaches, they both want the same thing, peace and well-being.
Which, honestly, who couldn't use a bit more of that these days?
Right.
So if you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe try exploring Zen and mindfulness.
Definitely worth a shot.
Yeah,
Because they both give you tools for living a more mindful life.
totally. Okay, so we've got these two practices, Zen, mindfulness. They both say they can bring more peace, more presence into our lives, but how are they different?
Well, a good place to start is their religious context.
Okay.
Zen, like we said, it's really rooted in Buddhism. It's got this whole history, rituals, lineages, a whole belief system.
Right. It's not just like a set of techniques. It's a whole spiritual path.
Exactly. Mindfulness, though, it's often practiced in a very secular way. It's like they took the core of it, got rid of all the religious stuff.
So it's almost like Zen's a religion, but mindfulness is more like a tool, something you can use no matter what you believe.
That's a great way to put it. And this difference in, background, it changes what they're aiming for, too.
Okay, so what are we actually trying to get from each practice?
So the ultimate goal of Zen, enlightenment.
Enlightenment.
Realizing your true nature. And they often do that through, no purpose, letting go of all that striving.
It's like that saying, the path to enlightenment isn't adding more, it's letting go.
Yes, exactly. Mindfulness. It's usually more practical, like wanting to stress less, focus more, handle tough emotions better.
So less about reaching nirvana, more about
Yeah.
nailing that presentation or
Yeah.
being there for your family, right?
Yeah. Although both practices can definitely affect all parts of your life.
Of course.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Now, I'm kind of curious about how Zen and mindfulness have spread around the world. They seem to be popular in different places, right?
Totally. Zen really took off in Japan.
Oh, yeah.
It's everywhere in their culture, art, poems, tea ceremonies, martial arts. It's wild how deep those Zen ideas go.
It's almost like Zen is an aesthetic, like a way of life that values simplicity and intention.
Exactly. Mindfulness, though, it really got big in the West, especially with doctors and psychologists and all that.
That's interesting. They've traveled across the world and kind of found their own places, hasn't
They have. And now we're seeing them blend together a bit.
Yeah.
You see Zen gardens, meditation retreats all over in the West now, right?
Right.
And mindfulness training. It's popping up in Japanese companies, schools.
Huh. The lines are getting blurry, which, it kind of makes sense. They both tap into that human need for peace and well-being.
Exactly. They remind us that there are lots of ways to find those things.
So true. And speaking of ways, we can't forget about those key figures, the people who brought these practices to the world.
Oh, for sure.
Like, on the Zen side, we've got Thich Nhat Hanh,
Oh, yeah.
that Vietnamese monk, peace activist. He really brought Zen teachings west.
His books have been huge, bringing that idea of engaged Buddhism to so many people.
Finding peace within to create peace out in the world, right?
Yes. And for mindfulness, we've got Jon Kabat-Zinn. Remember him from earlier?
Yeah.
He came up with mindfulness-based stress reduction at University of Massachusetts Medical School, and that made mindfulness way more accessible.
That's incredible. It's amazing how just a few people sharing their knowledge can end up creating global movements.
It shows you how powerful these teachings are. They speak to people everywhere.
It really makes you wonder, with Zen and mindfulness kind of mixing together now, is one really better? That's the big question, right? Zen or mindfulness. If you want more peace, more presence, what do you choose?
And that's what's so cool, actually. It's not about picking one side or the other.
Okay.
It's about, what works for you, what feels right for where you are in life,
I love that. It's less about the right path, more about seeing what's out there, like trying on different glasses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Zen, with that whole no purpose thing, it can be tough at first.
Right.
But that letting go, that surrender, it can be really freeing for some people.
Yeah.
It's like peeling back layers to find that deep presence, that acceptance.
It's funny you say that. I was reading something about Zen, and it said, drink your tea. Just drink your tea. It's so simple, but it made me think about, just being present in that moment, even if it's just having tea.
Totally. And while Zen has that depth, mindfulness, it gives you tools for, everyday life. When things are crazy.
Exactly. It's like, how do I deal with 500 emails and a kid who's melting down? Mindfulness is that pause button.
Yes. And the wild part, they come from such different places, have different styles, but they both kind of lead you to the same place.
Yeah.
Being more awake, more aware.
So maybe it's not Zen versus mindfulness. Maybe it's Zen and mindfulness. Like they work together.
I like that. And who knows, maybe if you try both, you'll find stuff you wouldn't have seen otherwise.
I'm all about a little self-discovery.
Yeah.
And speaking of, our source actually had some cool videos on Zen and mindfulness.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we'll link them in the show notes for anyone who wants to go deeper.
Awesome. Those are really helpful for getting a feel for both.
Totally. But for now, let's leave our listeners with something to think about. If Zen is about letting go of goals and mindfulness is about being present right now, could they be two sides of the same coin? Two paths to a more mindful life?
That's a good one to sit with.
It really is. And on that note, we'll let you go on your own deep dive. Thanks for listening.